Ladies and gentlemen, this is a Bitcoin news emergency broadcast. Coinkite, the company behind COLDCARD, has published the single worst advisory any hardware wallet maker ever wants to write. There's been a firmware bug meant that the device was not generating seed words from true randomness. On the Mk3, the security of your seed may have been closer to 40 bits than the 128 you were promised. Roughly 594 Bitcoin, about $38 million worth, gone from nearly 500 wallets in a handful of blocks. NVK, the CEO of Coinkite, has taken full accountability, but the damage has already been done. He also told us Coinkite does not store customer data, which means they cannot warn their own users. And that is why we are live today to get the word out. The firmware fix does not save a seed you already made. There's nothing that can save it. So only migration fixes this problem. First, we're going to dive into the facts. We have a panel of experts to come and help explain the situation, and then we will describe step by step what you need to do to make sure that your Bitcoin is safe. All right, I am joined right now by Josh, the founder of Nova Sapiens, a Bitcoin custody consultant and expert in the subject material, as well as Zach Herbert, CEO of Foundation, another hardware wallet company. Gentlemen, this is a very serious and dire day in the Bitcoin self-custody community. There is a lot of alarm going on out there. I want to first hand this off to Zach. I know you have a limited amount of time with us. There's lots for you to be dealing with today. If you could just give us a quick breakdown in your own words of what exactly happened here, I think it'd be good to set the stage.
For sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me. And yeah, it's been a kind of a crazy, period and running on low sleep. So apologize, if I make any mental lapses, but really tough situation. Effectively, just to boil it down as simple as possible, I think you did a good summary. All COLDCARD generated seeds from the beginning of 2021 through today did not have sufficient entropy or source of randomness is like the more, common way to explain it. Now, it varies by model of device. Mark III had much worse than the Mark IV and later. But what all of us, Bitcoiners are trying to do right now is get the word out there and help people migrate their funds. There's some nuance, if you use like 100 dice rolls, if you have a very strong passphrase, you're okay. If you have a Mark IV or later, you might be okay, but we still recommend that you get those funds migrated as fast as possible. Unfortunately, this was introduced in early 2021, like I mentioned. The bright side, though, is that actually if you were a COLDCARD user prior to that, from 2020 or before, looks like you are okay. So I'll stop there and obviously help answer any questions. Yeah.
And yes, I'd like to pass it over to Josh. You help people with self-custody on a daily basis. How bad is this?
Yeah, thanks for having me. And good to see you, Zach. Great here. This is honestly a nightmare. I'm a fairly empathetic person. My heart hurts for the people who've lost their Bitcoin this day. As a Bitcoiner, I know what it feels like to put your faith and your trust in your store your time and energy in Bitcoin, and waking up having that gone, or waking up and just knowing that the possibility could be that your wallet's going to be drained or empty. That's a hellish kind of situation. Your life can change overnight. So this is a bad situation. This is about as worse. And I get made fun of a lot. In Nova Sapien, we use Seed Signer and we use Dice for the source of entropy. We this year recently went to using Foundation devices as one of our exclusive signing devices. We have a Seed Signer as a backup with Dice source of entropy for that base level seed, and then the subsequent seeds we use for signing devices and things like that. But I think this is a moment where we get to reflect and realize that Bitcoin is trustless. It should be trusted. Don't trust, verify. And if you're creating your seed on a device using a source of entropy, you're trusting that. That comes with those kinds of risks. So I'm really yeah, my heart goes out to everyone's lost their Bitcoin, and I'm really excited to see Bitcoiners evolve and, you know, use better sources of entropy. You know, make sure that the companies that they're using, they are trusting as much as they can. Yeah.
And we're going to get into the steps of what you should do now, migration, dice, all that later on in the show. But Zach, while you are here, I really need to ask you, I mean, it's kind of crazy. You, of course, run Foundation. You guys are a competitor of Coinkite. I mean, it's just what it is, right? But also sort of this whole entire story goes back to when you guys started. So please explain what that is and clear that up for everybody watching.
Yeah, I want to be careful because I don't want to make any causal claims, right? But I can present a timeline of the situation that I think is plausible and fact checkable. Because when this came out yesterday evening, everyone was rightfully asking what happened. But I was thinking, and some of my teammates were thinking about why this happened. And so when I saw some early reports come in yesterday evening, I think for me it was like around 5 p.m. something Eastern time, I saw that this affected someone who had set up a device in 2021. So the first thing I did was I went to my AI, and we at Foundation, luckily, I mean, it's a whole nother thing. We had to KYC for it, which I'm really pissed off about, but we have the GPT cyber access so that we can ask it to look at these code bases and not get like flagged right by the AI and shut down. And I asked it specifically to look at anything in 2021 that would have caused this change. And what I was thinking about immediately from living through this situation was that the Coinkite team made a major change to the code base in early 2021 for multiple reasons. So one reason was to add like the new libsec, library stuff that they were working on for a while. Another stated reason, which you can find in the release notes for that release in March, was to remove all GPL code. And GPL is the most radical free and open source software license. It's a copyleft license. The impetus for that desire to rip out all GPL code was Foundation starting in mid 2020, where we announced that we were building on COLDCARD code and Trezor code as a starting point to bring the first passport to market, which were both free and open source software projects at the time. Not forking, not cloning, but we brought in a bunch of COLDCARD code, absolutely. And within 2 days of me announcing that in 2020, Rodolfo, NVK, the CEO of Coinkite, announced that GPL may have been a mistake. And it seems like they kicked off an effort to remove as much as possible, including the Trezor crypto libraries from the code base. Now, this was not a direct fault of that. This has nothing to do with the crypto library that was swapped in, but it was a very large change to the code base and kind of celebrated the final removal of this GPL code. Now, obviously what happened is someone made a mistake. And in this very large code commit, when they migrate everything to their own library, which is called libngu at the time, what they were calling on a specific piece of other code in order to generate these random numbers, this entropy, and it was not wired up correctly with the new code. And by wired, I mean wired up in software. So like the hardware hadn't changed, but the software wiring wasn't there to properly call on that. And then when they introduced the Mark IV and later models, they added in a separate, yet another secure element, and they were able to at least wire it up somewhat. But instead of having 128 bits of entropy, which you have for a 12-word seed, or 256, which you have for a 24-word seed, and 128 is more than sufficient. We've done a blog post about that. It ended up being, from what we can tell, only 32 bits total, which is trivially brute forceable. Now, I've seen a couple things. I haven't looked at it as closely since yesterday evening. I've seen some other people say maybe it was like a little bit more, but still, like the principle is there. It's brute forceable. And so my main takeaway from this, besides it being like an absolutely horrible situation, is that we're a big proponent of FOSS, free and open source software, and having the industry collaborate and share libraries, share resources, look at each other's code. There's a reason why we built our new Passport firmware, our new operating system called KOS. We used BDK by Block. We used Rust Bitcoin library, which is like a standard library. It's very common in the software world to build on each other's open source libraries. And in this day and age with cyber stuff, it's I think that's the way to do it. You build on each other open source libraries, you turn the frontier models at each other's stuff, and you try to improve together. And unfortunately, I think with this COLDCARD incident, they chose to go away from that, world back then. And I'm not saying it caused it, but I'm saying it was one of like the causes behind why this very large change to the code base around that time. So I hope that gives context. But it's really just like it's a horrible day for Bitcoiners.
Thank you for that background. And it makes a lot of sense, right? If the code is open, we're able to look at it, test it, and adversarial think as a community. It allows us to all get stronger over time. Josh, I would love for your input on the importance of free and open source software when it comes to self-custody.
Yeah, I think Bitcoiners, the culture is open source. I love that. And I wonder about I know a lot of people said that the toxicity of Bitcoiners is like a feature, not a bug. I think this is an example of the opposite. I think this showcases how when we don't work together, when we are not adversarial in a collaborative way, but when we're like, closed source, holding things back, trying to compete in this kind of contracted kind of way, I think this is what we get. And I've not been a fan of the way that COLDCARD has. I guess for me, I can only speak from my personal experience. In 2019, 2021, I sent a series of really scathing emails. This was before I started doing wallet recovery and Bitcoin best practices. And I said to them bluntly, I said, the way that you treat myself and my friends that we work with by, the customer service, the shortness online, this kind of thing makes me not trust you as a company. And about, maybe it's not a retirement attack, but negligence essentially is a retirement attack for scammers. So it's like the stuff essentially the same thing happens. So I want to support COLDCARD, and I really am stoked on their innovation. I've am benefited from them in so many ways over the years. So I don't want to just neg them for the sake of it, but I think it's cool. It's okay to call a spade and say, hey, when you have that kind of toxicity of we got this blocking people and that kind of stuff, I think this is what that creates from an energetic kind of perspective. I hope that's okay to say.
Yeah, and I don't even feel as strongly as you. I mean, you'd think I would at this point after all these years, but it's more like I do agree with you about the collaboration. So examples of, I've been very critical of Block, BitKey. Yeah, I put out a whole blog post about it a couple of years ago, and to their credit, they fixed everything that I was critical about. And I speak to them. I speak to folks at Block. I talk to them at conferences. The Ledger guys, I'm not a Ledger fan. They have an incredible security research team, and they do responsible disclosure, and they go through the proper channels, right, to report to other projects. And so I feel like there's these two levels of this toxicity. There's the we can criticize each other, but we're professionals and we interact with each other. And even if I'm competing with you, if you email me something, I'm going to read it. If I write something critical about you, you're going to read it. We're going to try to improve together. And I actually think that's the majority of the hardware wallet companies, the software wallet companies. And I do think that there's this toxicity for sure in the Bitcoin space. And I think there are some toxic maxis, and I think it's not as bad as it was. But I don't want to say, once again, that's the cause of this, but I think it's very indicative of this situation probably would have been different if there was a more collaborative approach from NVK and the Coinkite team from the beginning, and working with all the other companies in the space. And I don't think that would have fixed it, but I do think we as an industry, we need to take away some serious lessons from this. And with the agentic security exploit stuff, like we all need to be very humble. I want to be very careful. Don't throw stones in a glass house. All I can say is that we've extensively reviewed our code bases, right, with AI, with the help of AI and humans, and we feel confident that like we don't have an entropy bug like this. But like, do we have other bugs? Maybe. Do I think we have any critical bugs? No. But is there always tons of stuff that can be improved? Yes, or hardened. And so it's very hard because like it's this combination of like, this could happen to any of us. This is horrible for the Bitcoin and self-custody community. Yet we also, for those of us who this did not happen to, we need to figure out how to work together and make sure that this does not happen to any of us at this, scale again.
Yeah. Yes. And Zach, I know you have to run, but
like 5 minutes. Yeah. Or
5 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
Well then let's bring Michael up on stage as well. We've got quite the panel here today to talk about self-custody and what is going on. Michael, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Doing good. Appreciate you having me on. Zach, good to see you. It's been a while.
See you.
Yeah. I would love to get your just hot take, your initial reaction to everything that is going on and how it has played out over the last 24 hours. Michael, please tell us, what are you thinking right now?
Yeah, I mean, so it's definitely obviously unfortunate. I think maybe the hot take is I don't really blame COLDCARD or like hold them responsible from a perspective of obviously right now this is their issue, but I think there's a grander point, which is nobody audited or was able to see this for however long it was existing in the wild. And I think as a quote unquote community or people that all care deeply about Bitcoin thriving, we haven't been as vigilant as we need to in the sharpening iron on our assumptions and where we're going. And I had this quote I was thinking about that it's probably not, it's a little crude, but it's the closest I can think of the situation we're in, especially right now with the drawdown, the DAT stuff, is the cowards never started and the weak died along the way and only the strong survived. And it's ultimately because we're so early in this monetization that it's still the Wild West. And this is changing in real time, where the idea of 2012 and how somebody custody this asset is basically the same today. Maybe slight changes, but it's fundamentally close enough. And somewhere along the way, the game changed, but people didn't change with it, meaning the six-figure Bitcoin price along with AI simultaneously got to a level where nobody started to check their priors. And you see these assumptions fall where we think of toxicity as, oh, this strength for Bitcoin, but it's starting to become the opposite because, and wrongfully so, we were a little bit antagonistic to, COLDCARD or devices in general. And I like actually regret that we call them plastic devices because we are referencing like they are plastic devices and like people are holding lots of wealth. And it's not to say that you shouldn't do that, but it's like, at what point do you cross the chasm where it shouldn't be all of that wealth? Because there's still some level of single point of failure, depending on how you set it up. And we can go down the long tail of more dice rolls, more multi-vendors, et cetera, et cetera. But like as you go further out there and as AI is proliferating, how small of a cohort do we get to that can realistically do this? And then what's the other side of that? ETFs, DATs, I think everyone here would agree that that's not the solution. And so I think that this is kind of in the same way I honestly think DATs and MSTR and these products are failures in the sense that we never gave the people that are looking for voices the direction on how we're going to monetize. It's such a nice thing for the brain to say, oh, we're going to monetize because the institutions are going to buy all this crap, and it's just not true. In the same way, we never gave an actual thing outside of hold your keys and you're going to be fine and grandma can do it. Well, grandma's not okay right now, right? And so that's the biggest takeaway is we just got to get better. We got to get louder. We have to get more vigilant and we have to work together. And I think you called it. I mean, this is a big learning. We have a lot of friends from Unchained. I'm close with a lot of the guys. And when you leave and sometimes you're a little, it's business. You want to be competitive. But at a certain point, you ultimately have to think of how do we expand the pie and think of like more lower time preference because this is good for nobody, and it's ultimately going to drive a lot more Bitcoin into ETFs and Coinbase, and I would agree that most people on this panel and also listening do not want that, and that's existential for this whole thing. That's why the founding of OnRamp existed, because we onboarded thousands of people, billions of dollars, and we just realized, of course, self-custody has a place, But at the end of the day, if we're going to get to everybody being able to preserve their wealth in this asset, is it realistic they're going to go down that path? And the alternative is bleak, because it means that it's centralization, it's Coinbase, and it's ultimately down the path where gold, I think, failed.
Yeah, and I think the biggest question that has arisen is like, what does this mean for self-custody? At Bitcoin News, we like to preach it, like take sovereignty, take control of your money. This is the one asset that allows you to do that. And yet we just got the biggest slap in the face when it comes to self-custody. Josh,
Can I throw out a path? And I'd be curious, because the gentleman here worked directly on self-custody, so they can tell me if it's realistic or congruent. The way I've thought about this is, in the same way gold is valuable and you can self-custody it, but the reality, and it's a base level currency for sovereigns, but most individuals don't custody all of their gold, and sovereigns use third parties. And there's trust networks, and that's the beauty of Bitcoin. You don't actually have to have a single entity that can custody it. You have the programmatic nature. That I think we go down this path of like, self-custody for all your wealth is the equivalent of like firearms training. Like, everyone should and can do it, and it's powerful, but you have to practice and you have to be very vigilant about staying up to speed, because you never want to pick it up 18 months from now and then have to use it, because that's when mistakes happen. But the analogy breaks down. If you park 10, 25, 30%, if you get to this world where you're 100% in Bitcoin and you get to that level, well, rationally, just in the same way you take dollars home or gold, 10, 20, 30%. And then if you lose it, you're not out of the game. Like, you don't have to go far down there, and you can change that dynamic. And so I just think that that's going to be a big component of this notion of, you're going to have more trusted setups like on-ramp, multi-institution custody, and you can pick your risk profile, and then you'll ultimately will have more hardened self-custody products. And then you'll just be able to play that and oscillate, especially if draconian measures come in and you're in Europe or wherever. You can withdraw directly to that wallet. You have it redundantly safe. But at the same point, you're not putting yourself, your family, or just not accessing financial services. That's how I kind of like am thinking about it.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. Just for clarity, did you say firearms training?
Yeah, just like managing a firearm. Like, anybody can do it, but the reality is you got to, like, be practicing vigilant. And if you set it down, you pick it up 4 months later, and you're always a little just hesitant on, like, what the situation is. It even loaded, or did you, have
Totally.
a cock?
I think that's a perfect analogy. And yeah, I think the saying that I love circling back to is, the best investment in Bitcoin is the time to understand it. And so I don't think that Bitcoin self-custody is like a YOLO, create your keys, go 100%. I think the self-custody starts with understanding it. And I, in like 2020, 2021, that's where my journey started, was helping friends understand that and building little kits. Since then, that's developed into a kit. We have a little tactical mole style kit. And then in here, we have everything you need to start understanding Bitcoin. You start with your source of entropy as dice. We use dice as a source of entropy, and you choose your words from the BIP39 word list that's standardized. And so that is where the entire security rests, is where that form of entropy is. I think Zach was explaining a little bit of what happened with COLDCARD. My understanding is they had the time, or the serial number of the device and the time it was generated as the source point of the entropy. And so everything else after that's deterministic. So you can just go through and brute force it. The one little tiny thing where, instead of going to their random number generator, which they did, it was like an off on off toggle, I think. And then it went through to like this lower state. So that kind of mistake happens when you're trusting that form of entropy. So like that's where we really are, let's roll dice, choose your words yourself. That way you can see that you're reaching into the universe, picking out a grain of sand of randomness with that dice. And then we use a seed signer to create that 12th word, but you can also do that on the Passport device. I'm a huge fan of the old device is what I've used a lot. I know that's not really offered anymore. Zach, are you able to roll dice with your new device and generate your 12th word?
You can Passport will generate your 12th or 24th word for you automatically if desired. We do not support like dice rolls, but you can bring in those 11 or those 23 words, which we think is a much better way to do it. I don't like trusting the on-device dice roll software stuff. Yeah,
totally. Thank you. No, that's awesome. Yeah. And I think that's a reflective of your company culture. I've been with you guys since the very beginning. And I really love that. Like the functionality is in your hands. I love the seed signer because you build it yourself from like a Raspberry Pi Zero. Yeah, you can source that, no Bluetooth, no Wi-Fi. And so that's like you can build that with a little 3D printed case. You can print it yourself, or you can buy it on our website, or you can buy a pre-built one. There are a number of providers. The seed signer, the man, does it also. But yeah, that initial source of entropy, I think that's where a lot of misconceptions of Bitcoin are understood. It's like it shines a light when you use that dice roll and you create your 12th word and you export your public key onto your phone or your computer, and you start there. That like helps you understand what's happening. And a lot of the security theater that a lot of devices have, which they trade knowledge for convenience. I think those all come undone. So that's where I recommend people start. Roll your own key, generate a wallet, have use it, and then fairly soon you'll be able to work up to like a multi-signature wallet on Steel. You're made with the 2 of 3, and then you can have a multi-signature wallet or multi-vendor, multi-signature.
Can I jump in real quick just to throw something spicy out? Because
Love it.
I'm gonna say the same thing though.
Oh well, I don't. I think it's gonna be a little different. I was gonna go at it like, where do we go from here? Because go ahead.
Before we go to that question, I think we need to reiterate we're about a half hour into this live stream, and we just got this question. This is clickbait. Is my BTC gone if I own a cold card? Let's answer that question once more. Zach, please.
Yeah, and I got to go in 2 minutes. I got another call, but if you generate a seed on COLDCARD, it's like if you used COLDCARD to generate your seed between early 2021 and now, you just get your stuff migrated off. It's like the easiest answer for folks. And then the only thing I was going to say too is like we gotta figure this out from the UX perspective. I'm sorry, no one's doing Steel QR codes, no one's doing dice rolls. That's not what's going to happen. And I'm thinking here like, got to bundle something up that's maybe there is a multi-institutional, maybe there's a collaborative model. We got to figure something out that works. And I like what the Anchor Watch guys are doing, where they got insurance for it. I think that's pretty cool.
I owe you a test. Zach was nice enough to send this most beautiful hardware device, and it's been sitting here. So maybe we'll get you on the pod, Zach, and we can
we'll talk about it.
What's going on.
We got to figure this out. I think it starts with the user experience, and I think we got to do something that even though I'm very confident with the way Foundation has done everything, still it's scary to have all your eggs in one basket with no parachute, right? And we got to figure it out. And we got some good tools in front of us, and we got some great companies that are working on it from different perspectives. Multi-institution custody, collaborative custody stuff, carry your own metal, QR codes. There's a lot of solutions, but I think we can figure it out. I got to hop off though, guys.
You make some great points, Zach.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah,
thanks, Ed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Rob. What I was gonna just throw out was like kind of was just effectively like we've had the most vigilant, technically privacy-focused individuals touting self-custody and COLDCARD, and then some of the most reputable firms touting cold storage, collaborative custody with cold cards. I think everyone Zach named is there, and now they're all on calls right now with clients potentially losing assets. And it's just like, what do we do? How do you come back from that? And there's so much. It really reminds me of the DAT stuff, because the problem is that people are busy, and so you put a lot of trust in influencers, and that's where we ended up in that deal. In a very similar setup here, where it's like, oh, you do it, but the crazy part is all the individuals that were vigilant never checked any of this. There's a whole notion of trust, don't trust, verify. And this stuff sat out there, and there's a lot of people, and everyone was good intended. There was not like malicious component to this. So it's more of an open-ended question of like, what do we do next?
Yeah, because I mean, I've again pitched self custody to many people close to me, many people through this platform, of course, that we've built at Bitcoin News. But if we need to go back, which feels like you can only do it if you roll dice, it's a super hard sell. It's a super hard sell, like there are those of us who are intense and we're maniacs and we are privacy focused and we want the utmost entropy and whatnot. But like I've been in Bitcoin for a good amount of time now and I haven't rolled my dice yet. So if even I have not done it yet, then it means there's probably a very small percentage of the Bitcoin population that has. So yeah, maybe the future is sort of like that spectrum, right? I mean, there are more options now than ever before between the ETFs, multi-institutional custody with you guys, of course, and many other options such as Unchained. But it's a hard place to be in when the one thing that we've been really harping on, which is financial sovereignty, is put into question right now in this new age of AI. Michael, have you heard of anybody who's lost funds from this?
I haven't. I'm actually perplexed on as myself because you said it. Like, I know you referenced the dice earlier, but there's a reality of like you have to be able to measure the entropy in multiple ways. Like, that it's being actually inserted on whatever hardware device, and then you also have to be able to verify you added enough entropy. And so, depending on where the exploit was, I think one of them you needed to literally roll 99 dices or 100 dices to get to the 256 bits. And so we have no shortage of people all last night and then this morning texting, thinking they're safe. I have a COLDCARD set up with passphrase, and it was so long ago. I like look at this barbell, and it's kind of what we're talking about, where I do value being able to hold that metaphorical bar of gold. And so I can't even remember if I had set it up with a passport or a COLDCARD, but I had cloned it effectively, added the passphrase, and so it was more recent. So I don't necessarily think it's at risk right now, but I think based on everything they're saying that you want, if it was the seeds were created on a COLDCARD, you want to move them relatively quickly in the next couple of days or weeks. Um, I don't know why anybody would stay at least until they update the firmware, but then it's also just like, how do you know the next exploits there? The thing that I think is more important than any of this is how do you know ledgers and everything else are okay? Because that's the hard part, is this is going to be an increasingly moving target with exploits. And so you can go and do all these things, but then what does it look like 6 months, 12 months from now? And the last thing I'll say is I think like we just have a lot of built-in fallacies to all these conversations we have, simply because nobody tells you in the real world to put all your money in gold and then take it to your house. Like, that's just not a rational thing to do. And so Bitcoin was founded, and then we had hobbyists, and then Mt. Gox happened, and it was a small corner of the world, and nobody had eyes on it, and nobody cared about it, so it worked. But like I mentioned, the game's change, and so we just have to like level up. And I think time's a flat circle. Like, we have a precedent for this with gold and how it's managed and why goldsmiths look. It's just going to be different because Bitcoin is programmable, and you don't necessarily have to have a single entity that can move or lose it. And then that just naturally changes the game theory around risk and what's required.
I think you pose a lot of great questions and thoughts in there. Josh, this one's for you from the audience. What do you guys mean by entropy?
That's a great question. Randomness is the answer. Imagine if you flip a coin, it's either going to land on heads or tails. That's random. But if you flip it in a way so oh, I'm going to flip it twice and it's going to land back on the same side it came up on, that's not random, because you're going to be able to. So we reach into the universe, we pick out a piece of randomness. We can look at that with radioactive decay, or the clouds in the sky, or bubbles in a lava lamp, or there's software that have random number generators that use different sources of randomness. Like this COLDCARD used the serial number of the COLDCARD along with the time it was generated on as like a software standard that was just hidden around down there. I forget the name of the standard, but that's like the starting point. And so you can, if you know that, then you can know the deterministic numbers that come after that. But yeah, that's the answer. Randomness.
Yeah, this whole entire thing, cryptography, it's all based on the fact that it's all random.
Yeah.
At the foundational level. And Michael, over to you. In terms of custodians and institutions, how do we know that they have proper entropy and randomness and won't find the same problems that they've had here with the cold card?
Yeah, it's a great question. You don't have to pull it up, but it's less meant to be a plug and more of just, we were last night going back and forth talking about what's going on and explaining things, and it naturally came up. Just the notion of, well, why can't this happen to you? Or I could get to the same level of robustness when it comes to security rolling my own multi-sig. And I think once you get long enough on that tail of randomness, you could possibly, but not in the same way. And so the main point is, and the way I like to explain it is, there's different levels of key generation. And the simplest way is, think about it on a barbell. And on the left side of the barbell, as was referenced, you can generate a key on a consumer grade device. And I think a consumer grade device is something that somebody can pick up, whether it's a mobile phone or a C-sign or a COLDCARD or any device. And the key thing to know there is, you're trusting the device for the randomness. Yes, you can add entropy. Again, we can talk about if people are going to do that, but independent of that is what's really important, and it doesn't get discussed, is it lives in a one-to-one relationship with the private key. What that means is the private key lives on the device. This kind of gets lost because a lot of people think that Bitcoin lives on the device. Bitcoin doesn't live anywhere, it lives everywhere. But the private key to access that lives on the device. And it's generally understood, except for COLDCARD because there's a secure element, but generally if you got a hold of a device, you're cooked, right? No pin, and you can brute force a pin. So the private key lives on the device in one respect, and then you have the mnemonic seed phrase, 12 or 24 words. So that works, but it kind of breaks down because there's single point of failures all over that attack surface or risk surface that you have. Now, when you go to the other side, when you think about institutional key generation, think about like Coinbase, the gold standard. They have to be the gold standard for the sake of this industry, right? ETFs, MicroStrategy, etc. They're building entropy in the private key with verifiable mathematics, but also adding additional entropy, but it's on a purpose-built device that's obviously air-gapped, but it never lives in that one-to-one relationship. So when you're generating that private key and then additional entropy, when you pull that private key off, it comes off in shards. Effectively, you'll end up in a 2 of 3, 3 of 5, 5 of 7, and each of those shards live in their own fragment. Think of it as like their own hardware device, and they're each given to an individual. There's an audit log, there's video verification, and then all of those shards go off into bank security vaults. And you ultimately have processes from there all the way up the stack to a withdrawal to verify. So that's why institutional grade custody is generally looked at. And then, naturally you've had Mt. Gox, FTX, but those are different penetration levels of losses. It's less around the custody, even though that can still happen. It's more around controls and governance and all the things associated. So as you go further down that spectrum, that's why we focus with this notion of multi-institution, because as we were building out Unchained and collaborative custody, which was, I would say, a great solution, but more of like a stopgap, simply because you have these issues. You have the issues of, and I ran into it because I was using it. If you sufficiently do it correctly in a 2 of 3, you have your hardware devices, you have your seed phrases, right? So you have 4 pieces. And then if you go somewhere else, they'll tell you to do 3 of 5, right? So now you have like 6 different pieces of information. And if you're doing it right, you have to segregate them in all different locations, because why would you have that many pieces and then you collapse it? You just reduce that, you increase the risk or reduce the security. Most people don't do that for a number of reasons. A, because they don't have that many places to store it, and B, they don't necessarily understand the full construct, so they kind of keep it all underneath their desk or in one place, which just increases the attack surface of getting hit by bad actor, kidnapping, house on fire. But you end up with more issues as well, because if you do it right, then it's segregated, you have no access, and your attack surface is everywhere, and then you still have wallet config files to reconstitute, because you have to know how to do that if you're trusting that third party. And then if you do it right, you have no access. So if you're traveling, what do you do? And this is all the things that I learned as I went through this process in building. It's like, well, if you travel with it, you have a problem with TSA and overseas. If you don't travel with it and your wife wants to have the house, redone with the cabinets and people in your house, now what is that? And people can start putting those pieces together. Picture of a seed here, hardware device clone here. So the point being is that as you go down that progression, and I saw this firsthand, that people set up collaborative custody, but generally, as Josh was referencing, you have to deeply understand self-custody if you're going to move all your money there. And so a lot of people just never left BlockFi because they're like, wait, I just set up these hardware devices, I got dongles, and I got seed phrases. I didn't even understand it because it's a lot to go through concierge onboard, and it's very clunky, and it takes months or weeks, if not. And so point being is they just never moved it over, so they lost it. And so that's basically that component, but still FTX, Celsius, BlockFi failing. There was just this recognition that, and this was obviously pre-ETFs in 22, that the market would come back because Bitcoin's the best form of money. It has the properties that will have scarcity embedded into the rest of the world understanding that. And as the price came back, people and institutions and large capital is not going to go into these devices. No matter what we say and how we do it, they just won't. They're going to go into what's familiar with them. And so that was the realization, oh God, like we have to develop more robust solutions. And it's okay if we look a little crazy or wrong because, and I joke with Cam on our team, it's like, you're really onto something or you're just crazy if everyone thinks, doesn't like it, right? Because TradFi doesn't like it because they don't retain the ability to do all the funny business with it. And the hardcore Bitcoiners didn't like it and made fun because we're saying that it's not pure quote unquote self-custody where you hold the device, but it sits in this middle world where we like to say you get 10x the security with 1/10 the friction. And you also get all the inheritance, financial services, we have mortgage stuff coming, like everything downstream of how it looks at scale. So that's how I think about like key generation spectrum. And the main point to answer your question is every institution naturally has their own process to do it, but you're not trusting one institution's entropy or governance. If something happens, God forbid, to that institution, the Bitcoin's perfectly fine.
Well, there you have it. And Josh, when it comes to what people are dealing with now, they need to move off of the cold card, right? I mean, like that's hands down what you need to be focused on within the next couple of hours, if not days. And so when it comes to what's next, I mean, are we going to be looking at social engineering attacks? Like what other things should people have on their minds when it comes to being safe in this new environment?
The biggest risk, and I would just really emphasize this, is most like tragedies happen when you're rushing. So I wouldn't do anything in a rushed manner. And I would get your funds, obviously if you created your seed phrase from COLDCARD, then that would be get that, I don't know, to an exchange that you own that you're familiar with, or to a new seed phrase if you know how to do that, if you've done that before. I guess if you create a new seed phrase and you're familiar with it, I hesitate recommending, move it off to a new wallet, and then if they don't know, go buy a ledger and they've got all the seed phrases in one location, and then you're like, okay, I've got them backed up in my drawer in my safe, and then your house burns down, then you've lost all your Bitcoin as well. So those are kind of things. I think proper self-custody is the move. So do whatever you need to do to get it, to an exchange or to another device that you're familiar with, or create a new seed phrase, and get it off. And then I would learn some basics of Bitcoin self-custody, whether you're doing multi institution, where you've got Unchained Capital, or multi institutional multi-signature. I think that's a great way to go. But really, I love Bitcoin self-custody. I help families and companies move to a Bitcoin standard where they create their keys and they back them up properly, some multi-state, multi-continent sometimes. And it really does take some time to understand. I think the firearms example is a really great way to go. You want to do safe, responsible, competent firearm ownership. And I think that's the same with Bitcoin. I'm really proud of the services we offer. I recommend Unchained Capital, and we work with wallet recovery with institutions who have lost their Bitcoin, who have not practiced good practices. We're helping recover wallets. So yeah, we're happy to help support people as well.
And one thing to be sure to be aware of is that none of these companies are going to reach out to you, right? Coinkite is not going to come to you.
Thanks for that's a huge one. I don't know how I didn't say that right away as well. If the Bitcoin sales team calls you, they're scammers. If someone asks for your 12 words, they are scammers. Do not give your 12 words to anyone ever. No one is going to call you and ask you for your 12 words, or to ask you to connect your device to the computer, or to ask you to download new firmware that is I can only imagine all the people right now who are downloading updated firmware that protects from this, that then just steals all their Bitcoin as soon as they plug it into the computer. So that's a huge one as well. That's like that rushing. I would never do anything in a rush. I would just take your time. And again, we've got our contact on our website. I'm happy to put one of our guys to help give some basic advice. Yeah.
And Michael, I know you think a lot about business and marketing and making sure that your company is in the right position and light. Where does Coinkite go from here?
It's a good question. I don't know. I think there's a way out of this, but I think it requires kind of shaping with the rest of the industry on how you can verify as much as possible, right? Like, I mean, I don't know. I'm very I'm always shocked and surprised by, you know, I hate to harp on it, but it's the same thing with the DAT stuff. It's like they said at 99%, and people still talk about them positively, like they're a thing. And I think like these things can just persist, whether it's good or bad, longer than you would expect. And so I think that there's some like rational way to shape transparency, audit the code, visibility into how other hardware manufacturers, because I think that's where this goes no matter what. If this could happen there, it can happen anywhere else. And if you're running a good business, you're going to naturally have to be as transparent as possible with others. But I'm not like a hardware manufacturer or an engineer in the sense like there does open up other attack surfaces the more you provide that transparency. So it's just it's a difficult one to manage because to the point we talked about earlier, like yes, going longer tail on the risk or reducing risk with more devices, more multi-sig, more entropy, but that just keeps more people out. And so I don't know. I mean, I think it's like the bigger question, honestly, is like, how do we go from single sig self-custody from here? Because the rational thing is for anybody that's doing that to question, well, when will this be discovered in the product that I use? And the crazy thing for Bitcoin is empirically like 61% roughly, I think was the last number River had put out, is in self-custody. That's like the value of the most sophisticated investors realize you need to sever the internet connection because you can't trust a third-party exchange. And out of that 61%, about, I don't know, anywhere between 70 to 90% sit in ledgers. Like that's just OGs. When you go across the world, you know, sheiks and stuff that are holding 30,000 Bitcoin are in a ledger, they're in a bank vault. And so if there's ever, God forbid, an issue there, like that's a crazy one in itself to have to deal with.
So many questions. Josh?
I remember back watching how Ledger handled the breaches. They had a number of really serious data leaks where they leaked all their customers. I was one of them, and there were some terrible things that happened to a lot of people, and they managed it in a really terrible way. In my opinion, they didn't take the full accountability, and like it kept on happening. And so I was like, oh, Ledger's gonna be like I don't know. I wonder if like being a company is just this is part of the challenges of being a company. And I hope the COLDCARD is able to continue the innovation that they do and contribute to Bitcoiners being able to self-custody their Bitcoin. I'm a big advocate for companies like being good for their customers and providing a really good service. I don't know. It's tough. Like you said, Michael, I'm not a hardware wallet company. I don't know how that experience is, but yeah, I think I'm not sure where it goes from here.
And Josh, you have talked to people who have lost Bitcoin in this. What do you tell them? How do you console them, and how do you keep them on the Bitcoin mission?
It's inspiring. The people that I've seen lose Bitcoin from scammers just recently, and I've no third hand and communicated online with some people who've lost it in this attack. I find that they have been Bitcoiners like us, and the way I feel, what Bitcoin has given me is more than the dollar number that I've gotten. I've gotten low time preference from it, and my life reflects that with the relationships, my health, the things that I've put into my life. And my good friend, H, we'll call him, he lost his life savings. He has a wife. He was about to get married, and he got up the next morning and was like, you know what? I've got a beautiful life. He just doubled down, and he's embracing the hero's journey. And they're building back their Bitcoin balance, and they're just right back on the train. So I don't think it's the end of the world. I think it can feel like the end of the world in the moment. It hurts. It's like a death. Sometimes you have to grieve it. You go through the grieving stages, and I think that Bitcoiners, they get back up, they get back on the horse, and they realize this is not the end. But it's a real big, like, life-changing events for sure.
And Michael, you deal with custody as part of your business. And so you work with people who have lost Bitcoin in the past. What are some lessons you've learned from working with all these different clients and how to protect your Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, going back to just the last question, that's really sad. I mean, I haven't heard firsthand, but you just think about how hard life is already. There's the world insane, and then to lose your money. So, like, deepest condolences. And I think that that's a great thing to highlight because it just adds to the gravity of anybody that's in this circumstance or thinking about it. They just need to take precaution. Don't, follow up with anybody that reaches out to you directly, but you just need to stay vigilant. On the side of working with clients, I mean, the interesting part of where we sit is, and I say this and it sounds like talking our book, but it happens to be true, is we end up working with the most sophisticated people, in my opinion, in Bitcoin. And it's because they've kind of gone through this journey and they've either lost Bitcoin, you think about like us as individuals, and from when we got into Bitcoin, how much has changed. We probably had kids, we probably now have a significant other that we're married to, and the price is appreciated. And so the confluence of all those things changes the gravity of the situation. And I like to kind of say it comes to that metaphorical device gets so heavy that when you're younger, the price is 1,000 or 10,000, you lose it. You're like, I can come back from this. But as it gets, the price increases, the device gets heavier and the ramifications get greater to the point of like, well, my descendants will never forgive me if I mess this up. And so you naturally have to go through all of what we're talking about here and end up in this other side of, oh God, I don't necessarily want full unilateral control of me being a point of failure into that. And so it's a journey, and to be honest, like there's nothing granted for sure, and something could happen to us. That's the big thing. I was texting with a well-known Bitcoiner last night about kind of fiat lied to us and incepted that there's a risk-free rate, right? We know, like, you hear the bonds and treasuries. And it's just not true. There's risk associated everywhere. You can die when you go to sleep. You can die when you cross the road. And you can lose your Bitcoin in any way. There is no secure way. But the realization we've come with, and a lot of people listening, is Bitcoin's the best way to protect your wealth in a risky world. But then you naturally have to go further and start to look at the risk profile and attack surface and come to the conclusion on what makes the most sense. And the kicker is, it's more gray than anything. There's no perfect solution that's risk-free. You have to think about what's your risk profile. And so that's how I personally think about it. That's why I still have something on either a COLDCARD or passport is I want that like metaphorical bar of gold, but at the same point, I want a lot of my funds in multi-institution. My family can get access to it if anything happens to me because the world's uncertain.
Yeah, I think you do, no matter what, want that hardware wallet where you can move your Bitcoin to in case you need a run, something happens. Like you want that escape hatch, which only Bitcoin gives you. And if you don't have that COLDCARD or passport or whatever ready to go, you could be out of luck when you need it most. So I think this conversation really.
Just one quick thing. And the reason why, like, as much as it pains me, and I know it'll be a little contrarian here, is it's not rational for that long term to be all there, is because what was talked about before with like the data leaks, like private keys are just data in the same way PII is just data. And on a long enough time horizon, if there's a single point of failure, there will be. We've seen this. Everyone leaks their data. That's why COLDCARD got rid of all their data. Now that's its own issue because how do they get a hold of people? But that's a different story. So now, we used to say this 6 months, 12 months ago, but now, like during this conversation, we could have found any of those data leaks, HubSpot, whatever, ledgers, thrown them in Claude, hooked it up to Apollo, any of their enrichment tools, and basically got 80% of all of those people's addresses, emails, notifications. That only continues to increase. And so what happens as the price of Bitcoin increases, the cost of violence goes down, whether it's because it's social, physical, digital engineering. It's just not going to be rational for somebody to hold all of their wealth in the best form of money on their person. In the same way, it's not rational to hold all your gold or a duffel bag full of cash. So this is just where we go no matter what. And the reason why we feel so confident in it is because we've already done the like work and onboarding all the people. And then the other kicker is just my background was in just general large tech. So I've seen commercialization at scale, and it doesn't look like, God bless it, but what exists today.
Yeah. And where do you see the future of self-custody, Josh? Do you think we're still going to be rolling dice and plugging in numbers on a calculator-looking device?
I do believe that a seed signer is something that every Bitcoiner should own. It's as much an education tool as it is a signing device. When you're traveling, I put a little video game on it. You can load a little SD card in there, and then it looks like a video game device. And so when I'm traveling, I've been with people who've had, their keys potentially compromised, and so immediately, boom, roll a key up, distribute it, throw it on. It's versatile. You can create BIP 85 keys, which are child seeds, so you can have travel wallets that you can lose and you can recreate the wallet so you don't lose your base wallet. There's a bunch of really cool functionality. I like to think that that's where Bitcoin will stay, like where the individual has power. I think that Bitcoin only continues to exist as it does if we use it, if the individuals own it. And I think semi-custodial is a great way. We work on some wallet recovery projects, which are really complex right now with some large companies, which are really fun to work on. Also, like high stakes, which is great. And I think having a few companies own seeds, I think that's definitely where the future will go. Perhaps in a family, you'd have multiple family members owning a key. And in the same way that you all, you remember your social security number, you don't tell your social security number to everyone. Your private key would then live on your device. You sign, mom signs, you can make a transaction. Then you could have security profiles, like you could include a company like Unchained or BitGo, and then they would like be the final signature. So they wouldn't be able to sign it on their own, but they would be able to be that final signature to protect against attacks. And there's lots of really cool things to protect against different types of attacks, government or coercion, the $5 wrench attack and those kinds of things. So those kinds of things you can all protect against, but it does take a lot of sovereignty and personal growth. I like to think that Bitcoin is going to stay with the people. I think it has to. I think we have to own it. We have to use it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Michael, when it comes to multi-institutional custody, is there a minimum?
No, interesting enough, we are, like, when you think about it, it's multiple institutions, they're working on your behalf, there's legal assurances. I think that's something that gets lost, that to the point just made, I do think like this will change. I've thought about like Sailor holding his own stack, and eventually you may have like a 304 and you have to sign first before the others, because that's an important function that, like, we still live in a trust society. It's a very doomeristic black pill to believe that we can't trust anybody, right? And so the idea is, like, somebody said it, and it's a funny analogy, but it still stands, of we don't want to live in a world where we have to test our food every time we eat it. And so we're just going to have institutions. You have to coordinate economic activity. So there's a reality of, if you have institutions like a Fidelity, Schwab, etc., like, why would they collude against you? So you have those people you can trust. But then ultimately, from the legal perspective, that in a 304, as an example, maybe to the point, you have one key material will get better. Hardware devices where kind of operates where there's like a 203 in that with your family, or however you want to do as a business, and those have to come together, and you have to sign that before those policies take place. And if you mess all of that up, then those institutions check in. Like, this will evolve over time. But the main point, to answer your question, was when we started, and naturally one of the big learnings was it's insanely hard, as you know, to make money in Bitcoin, right? Like, outside of buy, sell, and maybe lending, custody is really thought of as it should be free. And I think that is fundamentally just the wrong framework, because if you think about it, for services talked about here, holding your asset, it's the delta between you holding Bitcoin at $10 and 10,000, or 10,000 and 60,000 is how the hell you custody and how the hell you got consulting around it. And so we always just thought that was a fallacy, and so we had to start at the highest part of the network or clientele, because they would pay and justify our business growth. So the point in sharing that is we've been able to reduce our costs substantially, because that's historically what kept people away from using us, as either the BIPs-based model or higher fees. So people can sign up for $100 a month and get access to multi-institution custody, and it's a couple of minutes. That's a huge aspect of all this growth and engineering that's happened. Now, effectively, you can go on over the next couple minutes, and then you'd be onboarded in a multi-institution wallet, because all the keys are already created, sharded, etc. But you're really just hitting the APIs to get the XPub and then build the wallet. So it's pretty heady, and then you get access to all the things that I think are the other side of security, which we don't talk about. It's like, how the hell do you buy, sell it? How do you lend against it? How do you get an IRA? Like, if Bitcoin's money, the cold storage does one part, and it still keeps it away from being money to interact with how do you lend against it. Like, where we're going is we'll just have a card associated with your balance, and your Bitcoin will sit there, and you'll just have credit on it with Visa, And then if you want to sell a little of the Bitcoin to pay it off or roll over the debt, it'll go there because it's just a base level. You don't have to always move the underlying. It's just we're so early in all of those.
Which devices do you support, Michael?
Well, so that's the thing. Part of that exercise earlier showing the screen is it's less of a like consumer grade device in the sense that they're purpose built like hardware that is air gapped and then effectively win that private key. This is just institutional grade custody in general. There's no, it's usually like TPMs or devices that are taken like completely stripped away. And then when you go to reconstitute for like a key ceremony or signature, there's multiple parties that come together. So it's less of like a COLDCARD ledger Trezor
Yeah.
style.
And you're can you just clarify the company you're working with?
On-ramp.
On-ramp, awesome. Yeah, On-ramp's great, cool. Yeah, that's really interesting.
It's got to evolve, right? Custody of Bitcoin needs to continue to grow, to change, and we've still got the fundamentals, but these new things like a multi-institutional custody help, and hopefully will help us onboard a lot more people, right? Billions and billions. That's the dream.
Is on the On-ramp, Michael, I'm just curious if you don't mind going a little bit into your product. What would one of my clients, if they have a multi-institutional, multi-signature wallet with you, would they come with their own keys, some of their own keys? How does that work?
No, so the beauty of it is you can sign up in minutes. You don't have to have any devices. Now you can have like 2FA obviously to go through, add additional permissions, but what makes the whole system work is that not only, so like I like to think of it as security layers. The first one is technically, so you have, you know, multiple key components to it to sign, but then the step above it is legal assurances. So every custodian works on behalf of the client. The mental model I'd use is they hold that key in a sharded distributed way on your behalf and can only work on your direction. So once you get into our platform, you have all the financial services, but really the bread and butter is when you go to withdraw assets, you ultimately have to go through multiple independent video verifications with different institutions. In this circumstance, it's generally On-ramp and BitGo, but we have other custodians participating and others we're adding. And the reason why, like just to give you visibility into, and you probably experience this, is all the things we talked about here work until they don't. And what I mean by that is as the price appreciates, people will get uncomfortable in whatever setup, including multi-institution. And then naturally you go to a 305 or you'll have additional permissions, but that's the real thing that like On-ramp solves is a unified experience for the long term, because everyone's felt this. Traditionally in Bitcoin, you have to play hot potato. You went from Gox to Coinbase to maybe Cash App to X for Y or IRA to Y for collaborative custody, and then the collaborative custody scaled. If you're holding 100 Bitcoin, you're like, wait, that's too much. And so has never been this version where you can start. We have like our, it's called On-ramp Finance, where you can even earn on cash balances, buy Bitcoin, etc. But then you ultimately can graduate over to, okay, well, I want to get an IRA first because I like my stack cold storage, but I want an IRA to start here, and then I can go and get multi-institution. I can take a loan out against it. Now I can use this Bitcoin to get a mortgage. Like that doesn't exist. And so that's the core idea, is that as people graduate with their wealth or appreciation or inheritance planning, you don't have to necessarily hop around to different vendors.
Cool. That's great.
All right, so I think we're going to wind down the stream at this moment, but I want to leave people with actionable advice. Josh, if someone has a COLDCARD, they're just tuning in, what should they do right now?
I would get your COLDCARD and either generate a new seed phrase using Dice with self-generated entropy. I mean, ideally, you'd have a seed signer, and you do that with your BIP39 words. We provide the proper seed phrases. At the moment, though, right away, I guess if you are one of those COLDCARDs that has generated the seed phrase from the COLDCARD on the firmware that was vulnerable, I think exchange or a new wallet. Just get it off of that, because those funds will be drained from all of those wallets eventually. But things I would not do is act quickly. I wouldn't rush. And I would not give your seed phrase to anyone. Don't download new firmware from anyone online. Don't make any rush decisions. Call a friend who's knowledgeable to walk you through step by step. Do things slowly, and But yeah, if your funds are on those cold cards, you need to get them off to get them to exchange or a new wallet that you've properly backed up. And just to not labor the point, your seed phrase is your Bitcoin. Don't share this with anyone. Keep this in multiple locations. If your house burns down and all your seed phrases are in one house, your Bitcoin's gone. Yeah, all the basic stuff. And just a shout out for our company, Nova Sapien. We do self-custody best practices. We have a kit. This has everything you need in order to back up your keys properly and create your keys using self-generated entropy. As much seed signer is what we use as much an education tool as it is a signing device. Yeah, and it's a real pleasure to be on with you guys and Michael hearing about on ramp as well.
Cheers. Yeah. Any final thoughts, Michael?
Yeah, appreciate that. And I would say that the main thing is just be careful, do more research, because I'm not technical enough to understand and I haven't dug into it. But if you start transactions, like they're monitoring the blockchain, you just want to be careful with it, because generally you're going to do a test transaction and that might expose you. So look into that. We had a report breaking all this stuff down, and then if you guys want to join or anybody that's here, we're going to jump into spaces to talk about just like what do you do, what's happening. It's all like evolving in real time. I think Blocks has really been leading on a lot of the engineering deep dive. So yeah, you can find us on the spaces over there, and you guys are welcome to join and have a discussion with the rest of the folks that join.
Right on.
All right, both of you, thank you so much. Everybody at home watching this, you are part of the Bitcoin ecosystem. You are part of the Bitcoin immune system. If you know somebody who has a cold card who might be compromised, please spread the word. I know if you've advised other people to get a cold card in the past, it might be sort of embarrassing, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that people are able to keep their Bitcoin safe, swallow your pride, spread the word. This is a big deal, and we need to make sure that we get the word out to as many people as possible. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been Rob with Bitcoin News. We've got Josh with Nova Sapiens, Michael of OnRamp. It's been a very, very insightful conversation, and I think one that is necessary on this dark day, but one that we can use to look forward into the future and hopefully see a brighter one. Thank you so much,
Thanks,
guys.
Thank you, Rob.
Cheers.